Hi guys, so I've always wanted to review Moral Oral, and I've been very, very busy. So what happened is that there's this YouTuber named Totally Reacts where he watches YouTube videos and he does reactions. And I think as he's doing Moral Oral, I will just look at the episodes that he's doing and watch them for myself and then watch his reviews and then just give you guys a review and analysis. So the first episode I want to do of Moral Oral is cocaine. And what happens is that, Oral learns about he has like this religious project that he wants to do. He wants like the box of it. And what happens is that his dad was telling him money doesn't grow on trees. So his dad kind of talks to Mr. Figurelli and says, Oral should get a job. And, that was definitely very common. And I believe more Oral, it really looks like 1950s America, very conservative, very religious. So definitely that happened in a lot of older generations where they taught their kids, the value of hard work and the value of getting a good job. And and I do think that that's a good value. But, one thing about that Mr. Figurelli does is he pays Orel like 25 cents a day and he's allowed to keep the tips really. And there's always a sense, of one unfortunate thing about being a child worker is that, two things that happen. Like, number one, he gets paid, below minimum wage. I know 25 cents in the 50s is a lot, but, there are some people who believe that children should not be paid. And then there's people who say, okay, I have a family business. That means, the kids will be cooking in the kitchen and I don't pay them anything. I pay them, they get paid through living with me. So that's the first thing to talk about, that he's underpaid. And then the next thing is that his father's like, gimme, gimme, gimme. And there's plenty of parents who do that, where they have a child that works, like in the book This Boy's Life, where the stepfather, where the kid makes a lot of money on the paper route, he's not allowed to spend any of it. He finds out that his, in the movie, that his stepfather spent it on like cigarettes and other things. And then in the book, he finds out that the money was never saved, like it was spent really. And some people have that mentality when their kid had allowances, like, either you don't get any of it because I want you to save it for college, or you don't get any of it because you have to understand that you're living with the parent and the parent's gonna spend it on whatever really. Or back in the Depression, it was like, okay, well, the family's struggling, everybody has to pitch in for the family. Or the other thing is that sometimes you have parents that want to teach their kids responsibility. So they're like, okay, you're going to pay for the light bulb bill. Okay, well, your younger brother needs extra lunch money. You're going to pay for his lunch money. And to me, that's very like, I'm asshole, because you know what? If a child is making a paycheck, why should that child pay for the family? Why should that child sacrifice for the family unless it's a very desperate situation? Because, parents should be providers. They should not expect their kids to just give them money really. So like when it comes to moral, those are some of the themes in this episode. The second theme is what happens to Orel is that he learns from church that he should give to the poor really. And you're going to hell if you don't do that. And what happens is that he kind of gives his money to a homeless person, but he doesn't judge the situation. And the situation is that this homeless person's a drug, shoots crack cocaine, really. So Orel gives him money, and then the guy's like, I got to give you something because, I'm just, I just don't like to owe people. And there's people like that. And then he brings home something. He brings home that substance, and then then he says to his dad, I got a gift from this guy who's homeless. And he doesn't look into it, and they kind of like pause the camera on his mother and father. So it's kind of like the other issue too, that Orel's dad, Clayton, if I'm saying this right, like Mr. Orel, he doesn't like he's only he's only concerned about his son, is that his son learns to get a good job. And then he also says gimme, 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 which means that maybe he wants to spend his son's money. And then he's also disappointed that his son already spent the money, really. So, there's a sense of, as I said, him being selfish or self-interest. And sometimes when it comes to children, that there are a lot of parents, who just only care about certain aspects. Or sometimes if a kid can provide something to the family, they only care about that. Like, look at a lot of celebrities. There are a lot of times where child actors make so much money and the parents only cared about, the profit or the money, so they can live a lavish lifestyle, and they'd be like, okay, well, that's just what we live off of the kid, really. We don't care about how the kid struggles or who the kid's hanging out with, or if the kid's told, you know what, it's better if if the agent says the kid's better off going to a party. And, you look at people like Brooke Shields and how she posed in Playboy, or you look at Michael Jackson, how he struggled psychologically in their stories that he was prostituted. So it kind of goes down to that, really, where his father really just cares about getting some money and not really the other thing that Orel is doing. Because obviously you receive something from a homeless person, common sense would say, I need to look into this because, what could he be getting? What could he be told to use? There's definitely him not paying to the red flags, either being naive or just not caring. And I think more so it's just he doesn't care because he's let down that Orel doesn't have anything to spend. So it does show what I call pick and choose parenting. So Orel abuses the substance, and obviously, you see him, have like deadshot eyes, yellow eyes, and look all like hot and just be hyperactive and move in a very quick pace, really. So obviously he knows. Obviously, if somebody's abusing a drug, he's obviously going to be coming in and out of the house like that. So it kind of says, okay, while his parents didn't care about that change, really, and also his change in behavior, being more irritable, hyperactive, and desperate for cash. And then he gets so desperate one day. I mean, it's actually funny to see him run in and out of the store really quickly and help people in like fast motion. And there's one day where he gets mad and he beats up Mr. Figarelli. And Mr. Figarelli kind of has his head back and he's kind of like smiling afterwards. And there's two things to say about it. It reminds me of Midnight Cowboy, because if you watched the film and read the book, there's this character that Joe Buck in Midnight Cowboy beats with a telephone, and in the movie he shoves a telephone in the guy's mouth. And in the book you realize that this guy he beats up with a telephone, a priest, he's actually a masochist. And maybe Mr. Figarelli is like that too. Maybe he kind of enjoyed Orel's slapping him in the face and beating the hell out of him, because he kind of has his head's back and smiling, really. So that's also another thing too. Who are the kids working for? Or you look at the episode of Mr. Of the Bicycle Man of Different Strokes. Like he wanted Arnold to have a job, really, and then he kind of invited Arnold over to his place. So sometimes you don't know if maybe people are trying to use a job to kind of have a child around to do a couple things. Maybe they have a predatory thing for the child. Maybe they also have a thing of exploiting the child, like Mr. Figarelli does, by paying him 25 cents and paying him a low wage instead of hiring, an adult where they pay minimum wage. Or there's the other thing too, where, there could be people that want to have a child, really. So they kind of like, are like, okay, well, I'm going to take care of this kid, or I'm going to help this kid out because, I want to just be a father, even though I don't have a kid, type of thing, really. So at the end of the episode, Orel goes to donate blood and all that, and that's actually kind of when he gets found out, really, because that's also true with hospitals and other things like that. That obviously, as somebody who does work in a hospital, I can kind of tell you that hospitals really do a lot more intervention. So maybe the doctor looked at his symptoms and it was like, okay, something's up. Or the doctor kind of could have, he didn't take his blood. I think he took his blood or whatever. He can like test what's in his system. But usually hospitals do that, especially nowadays, because they want to kind of put you on medication. They want to do something like take the kid and put them in rehab, because what happens? You're making the money. That's what hospitals care about. And then also, so that's the only time he gets intervention. And then, the father, the cop, and the Mr. Figarelli and the doctor all like see Orel abusing the alley with the homeless person. So what happens is that he goes to his study, and that's also happened a lot back in older generations, where the parent would tell the cop, I'll handle it. And that just meant they know that the kid's going to get cracked with a belt a couple of times, which happens to Orel. So instead of saying, okay, you just had a child, your child has been abusing drugs, and you've been doing all this stuff, and he's been doing all this stuff, and clearly we know that drugs like cocaine or whatever, that he's probably been looking like this for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. He's been going to school like this, he's been going to church like this. It had to be more than a period of 7 days, really. So they don't question his parenting, and whatever, really. And, but nowadays they'll kind of do that. They'll probably remove the kid, put him into rehab, and then talk to the kid about, his parenting, his life, his drug situation and all that to kind of get a full image of what his life is like. So, back in the 50s, they didn't have that. It was just, you brought the kid home, you whacked that ass with a belt a couple of times. And that was the end of it. And then I think that, the message that Orel's father gave, I think his name's Clifton or Clayton, I think it's Clifton, that he gives his son is that, that his son was being a little deceived because he's saying that obviously people who sell drugs are super rich, really. So I think the point of it is you shouldn't give money to homeless people because sometimes they're very, very wealthy, and that's also true because there was a story in New Haven where I live where there was this homeless person asking for change on the green, and then what happens is he had one of his friends pick him up in a fancy vehicle. Or you give, or there's people who sell drugs and they look homeless, or there's girls on the street that are prostitutes, and they may be living well with a pimp or whatever, type of thing, or living well because they're collecting so much dough, really, like definitely our looks can be deceiving, really, and obviously, if somebody's selling drugs, maybe they are wealthy or not wealthy, but the other thing about it is that he's more upset that his son said the word smack. He was using slang. And that's an older generational thing. Because I remember there's some houses that if you said the word if you said cannot, you're fine, but if you said can't, you get smacked. Or I remember my father, if you said the word ain't, he would kind of get up and he would look at you like you said you just said like a swear word or a racial slur, really. There's old families that have that mentality of, what, proper English is very, very important. But, thou shalt not bastardize English language. So it does feel like, as I said, he's also an emotional parent, where that means he's going to parent Orel based on his emotions. If he gets upset, he's going to treat Orel a certain way. If Orel, does something that upsets him, he's going to treat Orel a certain way, really, but he's not really going to care about the full picture. And we all know that that Clifton is an alcoholic, so definitely, there's a sense of him not evaluating, himself, and I also think that's a psychological complex. He has no problem looking at Orel and looking at Orel's problems, but he doesn't really look at his own problems, really, and that's very, very telling. So again, I like Orel. It's a very cerebral show. I know why it was canceled. They said that was a little too dark. And then also they did an episode where they talked about women being victims of sexual violence. So, there's that controversy of, the other episode I watched was when Orel inseminates people. So it's always like, maybe if it's, you can't show women victims as victims, but if you show a person victimizing a woman, then it's a little different, really, and I do think with Orel, it kind of reminds me a bit of King of the Hill and South Park, almost like what would happen if Hank Hill had a lot less emotional intelligence and couldn't get over his trauma, and then he raised Bobby in a South Park type of way, really. That's kind of how I look at Orel. It's kind of like the mix of King of the Hill and South Park, but a great satire on, religious upbringings and conservative upbringings and religious and hypocrisy, and that's the real thing. Orel's dad, he wants to father Orel and teach him the value of money, and also that when you have money, you should also help provide for the family, or you should be like, okay, well, I live with my dad, I should get a cut of it. But he's being a hypocrite in the sense of not caring about Orel's drug addiction, and then also kind of not caring about Orel after he feels a little let down that Orel just didn't have a cut of cash to give him, so as I said, it is about religious hypocrisy and then hypocrisy itself, really, but definitely hypocrisy itself, but also themes about, the impact of good parents and toxic parents.